Again a stab, and he's gone. That's the wicket that's wanted. The stumps are going right, left and centre. The crowd are telling it for you. An absolute bedlam here at the Basin Reserve. When it calms down, we'll tell you just what did happen.
And no one really saw what was coming in 1978.
This time Burgess is off the mark. He'll get 4. A fine, free-flowing shot through point.
The atmosphere was incredible. There was an electricity in the air that don't often get at cricket matches.
It was massive in the sporting landscape in New Zealand. I remember that.
The English winter of 1977-78, England sent a pretty strong team to New Zealand for 3 tests. Bear in mind the two teams have played 47 test matches against each other at this stage. New Zealand hadn't won a game yet, so the whole country was very much willing them on. They've got a pretty strong team by this stage. Richard Hadlee was starting to emerge. John Wright, Bruce Edgar, well-established opening pair. There were some serious players there. England had a strong team too. Boycott, Botham, Willis, Hendrick, Old, Randall. You know, it was a serious team with well-established players.
Bob Willis bowling to Burgess. One bowls right through the gap.
England was bristling with firepower in terms of their bowling attack. It was very strong. Bob Willis was probably the most hostile fast bowler at that time, arguably with Tomo and Dennis Lilly. They had Mike Hendricks and Chris Old, who are expert seamers in those sort of conditions, brisk bowlers, but landed the ball on the seam and made it nibble.
Oh, and he's gone, flashing indiscreetly outside the off stump. And that could be a catch. Well up, and Cartman flashes and caught behind.
There was no expectation that New Zealand would be able to pull off what they did.
I'm a 21-year-old kid trying to make my way out of Palmerston North playing for Central Districts. Incidentally, that England team that played in that particular series, we played them in a 3-day game at Pukakura Park and it ended in a tie. So it was my first game of cricket ever for Central Districts. I mean, that's an England side that was captained by Boycott. So, you know, not the most popular man in world cricket, but certainly he was a notable player, a very young Ian Botham, Bob Willis, Chris Old, certainly a pretty handy bowling lineup and capable of knocking us over.
England, they weren't the strongest batting side they've ever sent out, but that's the way it is. I mean, you don't have to play against the other guys they've left behind. You play against the team that gets named.
It was the first test of the series. The wind was blowing strongly, as it often does in Wellington. Willis had the wind at his back. Everyone else had to slave into it. England were probably well equipped with their bowling attack because of that. Chris Old and Mike Hendrick bowled into the wind. Willis and Botham bowled with the wind at their back. The same with New Zealand. Collins and Richard Hadlee bowled with the wind. Dale Hadlee slaved into it.
Bob Willis ran in for the first ball. Righty backs it to Bob Taylor, and Ralph Gardner gives it not out.
Yeah, I don't think Ralph didn't get his head up in time. He was the dead opposite of Peter Crouch. He was, you know, his head was almost at bail height when the ball was delivered. I'm pretty sure, even in those days, I still had reasonable hearing in my left ear. There was a noise of some sort as the ball whistled through to Taylor, and there was a stunned silence from the England team when it was given not out. Righty freely admits it, of course. He did the right thing. I mean, who would walk first ball, first test? So that set the atmosphere off. Slow scoring was the order of the day in those days.
And that's John Wright's first run in Test cricket. Yes, he's home safely, and Wright is off the mark. After 50 minutes of batting, Wright on 1, New Zealand on 34. Willis. Congdon gets more runs, not an elegant shot, but he fends it off his hip. It may well be 4. Rose is giving chase, it is indeed 4.
This could be the 50, it is. It's 1 run, they're looking for 2. Rose round the boundary, does the fielding. Wright takes his 2 runs, 51 on the board, and a very fine performance from John Wright. He is this time because he's absolutely bowled all ends up by Botham, hitting the bottom of the leg stump, and that was the end of the innings, all out 2-2-8. Stephen Bott bowled for 4 by Ian Botham.
New Zealand scraped through to 228, which doesn't sound like a great total, but in the conditions it wasn't too bad, and England reflected that when they went into bat. It was very much similar for them, and if it wasn't for Boycott anchoring their innings and making 77 in more than 400 minutes, they would have struggled to get anywhere near New Zealand's first innings. New Zealand's bowling attack was very straight-laced and thin. It didn't have a lot of extra options. We had Dale Hadlee and Richard Collins. Stephen Bott provided the spin, and Richard, Hadlee and Collins did very well in the first innings, taking the bulk of the wickets.
This is the Richard Hadlee, the side-to-side shuffle in the long run-up, you know, and then Dale Hadlee with the more upright sort of and perfect action, and then Richard Collins left arm over. It was absolutely brilliant. Bevan Congdon with a few little wobbly seamers.
Certainly the expectations had been deflated a lot when New Zealand was bowled out for 123 in the second innings, Bob Willis taking 5 wickets.
That's in the air, and that's all over. New Zealand are all out for 123.
It left England only 137 to win in the final innings.
I didn't throw any teacups, but I gave everybody, including myself, an absolute serve about what we'd done in the second innings.
Once we'd been bowled out for 123, people were feeling a lot less optimistic about our fortunes, and all that dissolved in a puff of dust on the 6th ball of Richard Collins' first over.
Boycott, awaiting Richard Collins. And he's bowled in! Not a magnificent start!
Geoffrey Boycott being done by the Rock, Richard Collins, twice in the Test match. I've spoken to Boyks, I've worked with Jeff Boycott, and I've often reminded him about that, and he doesn't like talking about it. It was a cloud of dust, almost the perfect Yorker, and Richard Collins knocked him over. And I think at that moment, New Zealand thought, well, there's the Rock gone. We might have a chance here. And not only the players, but the fans, the public.
Richard Collins had Boycott all ends up, and what a magnificent start to the England second innings from New Zealand's point of view.
Boycott going, and then, you know, a couple of guys getting whacked. It got the crowd going, got us going. We didn't drop any catches, I don't think. Yeah, it went our way. Momentum swing, and it's amazing what can infect the side that's on the receiving end, and how it can inspire the team that's on top.
The opening assault by Collins and Hadlee, full of fire. And Miller Bedlam ends up his bottom. Oh, good day by Robert Anderson. Yorker left him on the pulse, tremendous appeal, given out and gone. Beautiful stuff.
England had no answer. I think they were 4 for 18. Batsmen were departing in a procession. There must have been mayhem in the dressing room with players getting padded up, because everything seemed to be happening so quickly. Collins was on top of his game, but Hadlee grew another leg. He was on his long run-up with the sidestep at the start of his run, and he was bowling like the wind. As fast as Willis had been bowling easily, he was terrifying the England batsmen.
Hadlee to Root. That's another good delivery. That's about the line that Richard Hadlee has got to maintain. That's exactly the delivery that Richard Hadlee had to bowl to Root. He's looked at that one, he's going to be out.
Hadlee was bowling very fast. There were scenes all around the Basin Reserve. We talk about how crowds sometimes swell when there's good fortune in the air, and certainly that was happening. Cars were stopping on the roundabout around the Basin Reserve, and people were just piling out of the doors and rushing over the turnstiles. There were grown men in walk socks and walk shorts and ties, as was the garb in those days during summer, clanging beer cans together and chanting, "Hadlee, Hadlee."
Oh, and that was perilously close to the top of the stumps.
It was quite an experienced bowling lineup, and you kind of sense that if England opened the door for them, they might just walk through it. And they did. The fielding was good. The guys held their catches. I think Lockie got a brilliant side-on run-out.
Quick fielding, they run out!
Isn't it amazing? You know, this long afterwards, I can still see moments of action in that Test match.
Old 9 facing Richard Hadlee with England 6 down for 53. Confident appeal, and he's gone! Yet another wicket for New Zealand. That's out! North Parker has taken a dance, has caught Mike Hendrick at first slip, and England lose their 8th wicket. 8 for 53. 17 wickets have fallen. New Zealand dismissed in their second innings for 123. England currently 53 for 8. The men to do the damage for England was Bob Willis, 5 for 35. For New Zealand, Richard Hadlee, 4 for 21 off 10 overs.
We'd had opportunities to win before, but never gone on and closed the deal. Thinking overnight that perhaps it wouldn't happen, and then the next day they came back and they did the job.
We wrapped the last 2 wickets up quite quickly. Brian Rose was left not out. He came in at the fall of the 9th wicket, but to no avail.
What a find, that's the one they wanted. Phil Edmonds, Richard Hadlee pitching that ball up, and Edmonds hanging the bat, the ball, a simple catch to John Parker at first slip.
Again established. Oh, that's the wicket that wanted. Stumps are going right, left and centre. The crowd are telling it for you. An absolute bedlam here at the Basin Reserve. When it calms down, we'll tell you just what did happen.
There weren't too many people in the ground at that stage, and the atmosphere that we'd been experiencing the afternoon before was really gone. But that had been replaced by this magnificent victory that no one had seen coming, and set New Zealand up for what became a decade of really strong performances on the Test scene.
It was a phenomenal achievement, really. Historic first ever win over England. Wasn't at the ground, but felt like it was, and that's how special it was.
Well, the first ever Test win to New Zealand over England as Richard Hadlee dismisses Bob Willis. New Zealand 228 and 123, England 215 and 64. A win by 63 runs to New Zealand in a game of fluctuating fortunes which really came alive after the first 3 pedestrian days of scoring. Only Wright, 55 for New Zealand, and Boycott, 77 for England, managed to pass 50.
Your first Test as captain, what do you feel?
I suppose it's a bit like stepping into one of Cinderella's shoes. I'm not too sure. I just happened to be in the right spot at the right time, but it's a pretty good feeling, I assure you.
Bob Knowles checked us out of the hotel the morning that Test was going to finish. A whole lot of booze got donated to the dressing room, and not much of that was drunk. I think quite a bit of it finished up in the back of Jumbo's car. There was no big celebration, fizzled out. Dag and I went and played a few sets of tennis up at the John Reid Tennis Centre that afternoon.
100 Test wickets, 500 first class. Now, how do you feel after all that?
Well, I don't feel so much my own performance statistics-wise, but I feel just happy for the team that we've, after so long, I've waited 13 years of Test cricket to win against England, and I'm just, very happy to have done that.
It's great for me to be part of this Test, because going back way back in 1937 when my father was playing for New Zealand against England, it's been 41 years that he's waited to see a New Zealand team beat England. It's tremendous for me to fulfil an ambition for him. And the boys played superbly, really. It's tremendous.
We did creditably in that, and we started to believe in ourselves. We had some very fine players, you know, in that era, who I'm just so glad that they were able to taste that kind of success and be the first. So it was massive in the sporting landscape in New Zealand. I remember that. Well celebrated. An easy one to remember, a really easy one to remember in that regard.
That was the win that set New Zealand up for the next decade of strong performances.
It was very instrumental in gaining respect amongst ourselves and respect amongst our public as well. So it was so important and so key, that particular victory at the Basin Reserve. One of the cornerstones, I think, of our modern era.